The day my parents called me worthless was the day they stopped being my safety net and became my first lesson. The gate camera chimed at 7:12 a.m. soft. Polite. Like it didn't know it was about to reopen something that had been closed for 7 years. I was standing in my kitchen, holding a cup of coffee I hadn't tasted yet. The mug was warm. My hands were steady. I glanced at the screen. 3 figures. Still. Waiting. My mother stood closest to the gate. Coat button too tight. Hands folded like she was holding something fragile. My father stood slightly behind her. Same posture I remembered. Straight. Distant. Like he had already decided how this would go. And my younger brother, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, like he wasn't sure where to look. I watched them the way you watch weather roll in. Not surprised. Just observant. My name is Tige Monroe. I've been told I have a way of making people feel comfortable, even when they probably shouldn't. It's a useful skill. Especially when you learn early that comfort is something people take, not something they always give back. The camera beeped again. My mother leaned closer this time. Tige, she said, her voice softer than I remembered. Softer than it had ever been when I lived under her roof. Please open the gate. Please. That word didn't exist in my house growing up. Not when it came from her. I set the mug down on the counter. Carefully. No rush. No noise. 7 years ago, there had been a different door. A front door. Same kind of morning. Same kind of silence. I remember the weight of a suitcase in my hand. Not heavy. Just final. My father had opened the door without looking at me. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. If you're going to be worthless, he said, calm and clean like a business decision, you won't do it here. My mother didn't argue. She adjusted the strap of my bag like she was fixing something small. Something insignificant. You'll understand one day, she said. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it felt polite. I hope I do, I told her. Then I stepped outside. The door closed behind me. Just like that. No shouting. No scene. Just a quiet removal. Like I had never really belonged inside to begin with. Back at the gate, my father finally spoke. His voice carried through the speaker. Tige. We need to talk. Need. Another word that sounded different coming from him. I tilted my head slightly, studying the screen. Same people. Different posture. Time does that. It rearranges confidence. It edits certainty. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the control. The gate button. Simple. One touch. Open or stay closed. I let out a small breath. Not heavy. Not dramatic. Just enough to clear the air. That's interesting, I said quietly, more to myself than to them. 7 years ago, I remember standing on the other side of a door. My finger didn't move. Not yet. Because some doors, they don't open the same way twice. I did not open the gate. Not immediately. I let the silence sit there between us, the way it used to sit at the dinner table when something uncomfortable was said and no one wanted to be the one to acknowledge it. My mother shifted slightly, glancing back at my father like she was waiting for him to take the lead. He did not. He never did when it required something softer than control. My brother finally looked up at the camera, squinting a little as if trying to see through it, as if he could still figure me out from a distance. That used to be his advantage. Distance. I pressed the intercom. You came a long way, I said, my tone even, almost warm. That usually means something important. There was a pause. Not long. Just long enough to tell me they had rehearsed something and it was not coming out the way they expected. My father cleared his throat. We would prefer to talk in person. Prefer. I almost smiled. I am sure you would, I replied gently. But I have learned that clarity tends to travel better through small conversations first. My mother stepped closer again. Tige, please, she said, and this time her voice carried something unfamiliar. Not authority. Not dismissal. Something thinner. We made mistakes. Mistakes. I repeated the word silently in my head, testing its weight. It sounded lighter than what I remembered. 7 years ago did not feel like a mistake. It felt precise. Intentional. Measured. I walked over to the window, looking out past the gate, past them, to the street beyond. Quiet neighborhood. Clean lines. Everything in its place. It had taken me years to build a life that felt like this. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just stable. I remembered the first night after I left. A bus station. Hard plastic seat. One suitcase under my hand like it might disappear if I let go. I had counted my money 3 times even though I already knew the number. $186. Enough for a few days if I was careful. Not enough for a plan. I had called no one. Not because I did not have numbers. Because I did not want to explain. There is something exhausting about explaining your own worth to people who already decided you do not have any. So I did not. I found a diner that was open 24 hours and asked if they needed help. The manager looked at me for a long second. Not unkind. Just practical. Can you work mornings? He asked. I nodded. Then you can start at 6, he said. No speech. No judgment. Just a decision. I liked that. Back at the gate, my brother finally spoke. Tige, we are not here to argue, he said, his voice careful, like he was stepping on something fragile. We just need a chance to explain. I leaned lightly against the counter, folding my arms loosely. That is interesting, I said, my tone still polite. I do not remember being offered that option. Another pause. This one heavier. My father exhaled slowly. Things have changed, he said. I nodded, even though he could not see it clearly through the camera. Yes, I said softly. They have. I let the silence return, just for a moment. Enough for them to feel it. Not as punishment. Just as context. Then I reached for the gate control again. My finger hovered, the same way it had before. Not uncertain. Just deliberate. Because opening a gate is simple. Deciding what it means, is not. I pressed the button. The gate unlocked with a quiet click that sounded smaller than the moment deserved. It did not swing open fast. It never did. It moved slowly, deliberately, like it understood that some entrances should not feel rushed. None of them stepped forward. Right away. They waited. That was new. 7 years ago, hesitation was not part of their language. My father used to believe that decisions gained strength from speed. Now he stood there, watching the space open in front of him like it might close again if he misread it. You can come in, I said through the intercom, my voice steady. The path is straight. You will not get lost. It was a simple sentence. It carried more meaning than I explained. They began walking up the driveway. 3 figures, slightly out of sync. My mother walked a step ahead, as if trying to reach something faster than the others. My father followed, measured, controlled even now. My brother trailed just enough to suggest uncertainty. I met them at the front door before they knocked. I had already opened it. There are moments where making people wait says something. And moments where not making them wait says more. My mother stopped a few feet from me. Her eyes moved quickly, taking in everything behind me. The house. The light. The quiet order of it all. She did not comment. She did not need to. I could see the calculation happening. My father looked at me instead. Direct. Focused. The way he used to when he was deciding whether something met his standards. You look well, he said. I inclined my head slightly. I have had time to practice, I replied. My brother let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh but stopped halfway. This place is nice, he said, glancing around. Thank you, I answered. I find that people treat spaces the way they treat people. If you take care of them early, they tend to hold together later. Another sentence. Another layer. I stepped aside just enough to make the invitation clear. Please, come in. They crossed the threshold carefully, like guests in a place they were not sure they belonged. That, too, was new. My mother paused in the entryway, her hand brushing lightly against the wall as if confirming it was real. You did all this? She asked. Her voice was quieter now. Not weak. Just aware. I closed the door behind them. Softly. The same sound as years ago. Different meaning. Yes, I said. I did. I led them into the living room. Clean. Lines. Neutral tones. A large window letting in the morning light. Nothing excessive. Nothing missing. Everything intentional. My father remained standing for a moment before sitting down, like he needed to understand the rules of this place before he could relax into it. My mother sat next to him, her hands folded again, tighter this time. My brother stayed on the edge of a chair, leaning forward slightly. I remained standing. Not to assert anything. Just because I was not ready to sit yet. You said things have changed, I began, my tone calm, almost conversational. I agree. I let that settle. Then I continued. The question is, which part would you like to talk about first? My father exchanged a glance with my mother. A silent conversation. The kind they used to have across the dinner table while I sat there waiting for a decision that had already been made. He turned back to me. We are here because we need your help, he said. Direct. Finally. I nodded once. That is usually when people find my number again, I replied, a faint trace of humor in my voice. Not sharp. Just accurate. My mother's eyes lowered. My brother shifted again. And for the first time since they arrived, none of them had a prepared sentence ready. I walked over to the coffee table and set 3 cups down, one in front of each of them. Then I took my seat across from them. Balanced. Equal distance. You can take your time, I said gently. I have learned that important conversations should not be rushed. And this time I meant it. My father did not reach for the coffee. He looked at it the way people look at something offered without understanding the cost behind it. Your brother is in trouble, he said finally, his voice steady but missing something it used to have. Certainty. I shifted my gaze to my brother. He did not meet my eyes right away. He studied his hands instead, fingers interlocked too tightly, knuckles pale. What kind of trouble? I asked, my tone neutral, almost curious. My mother answered this time, her voice careful, as if each word had been rehearsed and still felt fragile. Financial, she said. It started small. A business idea. Then loans. Then more loans. I nodded slightly. Patterns. They tend to repeat themselves when no one interrupts them early. And now? I asked. My brother exhaled, finally looking up. Now it is not small anymore, he admitted. His voice was lower than I remembered. Less confident. I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed. I allowed a faint smile to touch my expression. Not amused. Just familiar. That is usually when people stop fixing things, I said gently. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Just honest. My father leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. We have exhausted our options, he said. The house is leveraged. The accounts are limited. He paused, choosing his next words with more care than I had ever seen from him. We need support. Support. Not demand. Not expectation. Another change. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands loosely in my lap. And you believe I can provide that, I said. It was not a question. My mother's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw something I had not seen before. Not control. Not dismissal. Something closer to recognition. We know you can, she said softly. No. Not assume. Not expect. No. I let that sit for a second. Then I tilted my head slightly. That is interesting, I said, my voice calm, almost warm. For a long time it seemed like you believed the opposite. My father's jaw tightened just slightly. Not defensive. Just aware. We misjudged you, he said. Direct. No decoration. I appreciated that more than an apology dressed in softer language. I nodded once. Yes, I said simply. You did. The room held that truth without trying to soften it. That was new too. My brother shifted again, leaning forward a little more. Tige, I know I do not have the right to ask you for anything, he said. But I am asking anyway. I met his gaze this time. Fully. He did not look away. That, at least, was something. What exactly are you asking for? I said. Clear. Focused. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then answered. Time. Help restructuring the debt. Maybe, access to capital if it comes to that. He swallowed slightly. I just need a chance to fix it. I studied him for a moment. Not judging. Just observing. The same way I used to observe everything else. The same way I learned to survive without reacting too quickly. A chance, I repeated softly. The word felt familiar. Like something that had been missing from a conversation a long time ago. My mother's hands tightened in her lap. We did not give you one, she said quietly. There it was. Not polished. Not perfect. But real. I glanced at her, then back at my brother. No, I agreed. You did not. I let the silence stretch just enough for that truth to settle into the room. Not as punishment. Just as context. Then I leaned forward slightly, my tone still composed, still measured. The question is not whether I can help, I said. The question is, why I should. Not harsh. Not cold. Just honest. And for the first time since they walked through my door, none of them had an immediate answer. No one answered right away. Not because they did not hear me. Because they understood exactly what I meant. My father leaned back slowly, his fingers pressing together as if he was organizing his thoughts into something structured. He had always believed in structure. Order. Cause and effect. But this was not a situation he could calculate his way out of. Because we are family, he said finally. The sentence landed in the room with a weight that felt familiar. I let out a small breath, almost like a quiet acknowledgement. Family, I repeated softly. Then I nodded once. That is a powerful word. I reached for my cup this time, taking a slow sip before setting it back down in the same spot. Precise. Controlled. It is also a word that tends to change meaning depending on who needs something, I added gently. My mother's eyes lowered again. My brother shifted, but this time he did not look away. He held my gaze, even if it was uncomfortable. I respected that more than anything he had said so far. You are right, he said. No defense. No excuse. Just agreement. That was new. I tilted my head slightly, studying him. Tell me something, I said. When you made those decisions, the loans, the risks, did you believe someone would step in if it went wrong? He hesitated, then gave a small nod. Yes, he admitted. I thought I could fix it. But I also thought, if I could not, someone would help. I nodded again, slowly. That is an interesting kind of confidence, I said. The kind that borrows strength from people who were never asked if they wanted to lend it. The room went quiet again. Not tense. Just exposed. My father exhaled through his nose, his gaze steady but less rigid than before. We cannot change what we did, he said. But we are here now. I met his eyes. Calm. Even. Yes, I said. You are. I let a small pause settle between us before continuing. And that matters. Just not in the way you might expect. My mother looked up at that, her expression searching for something in my face. Maybe anger. Maybe resentment. She found neither. That seemed to unsettle her more than anything else. I stood up slowly and walked toward the window, glancing out for a moment before turning back to them. You asked why I should help, I said. The honest answer is, I do not have to. I let that sit, not as a threat, just as a fact. Then I softened my tone slightly. But I also understand something now that I did not understand back then. I looked at my brother. People do not always fail because they are careless, I said. Sometimes they fail because no one ever taught them how to carry responsibility without being rescued. He swallowed, his expression tightening slightly. Not defensive. Just processing. I turned my attention back to my parents. And sometimes, I added gently, that is not entirely their fault. My mother's eyes filled, just slightly, but she did not interrupt. My father remained still, but I could see the shift in him. Subtle. Controlled. Real. I walked back to my seat and sat down again, this time leaning forward just a little. Not distant anymore. Not fully close either. Balanced. So here is what I am willing to do, I said calmly. I will look at the numbers. All of them. No filters. No omissions. I will tell you exactly where you stand and what can be done. My brother nodded quickly, almost too quickly. Thank you, he said. I raised a hand slightly, not to stop him, just to slow the moment. I am not finished, I said, my voice still polite, still composed. Help is not the same as rescue. I let that sentence land fully. If I step into this, it will be structured. Transparent. Accountable. I glanced at my father. No exceptions. Then at my brother. No shortcuts. Then at my mother. No silence when something needs to be said. I leaned back slightly, my expression softening just enough to keep the door open. If we do this, we do it differently. And this time, when the silence came, it did not feel like avoidance. It felt like consideration. I stood up again, not abruptly, just with intention, and walked toward the hallway where my office was. Bring everything you have, I said over my shoulder. Statements, loan agreements, emails. If it exists, I need to see it. There was a brief shuffle behind me, the quiet sound of papers being gathered, a bag being unzipped. When I returned, my brother had already placed a thick folder on the table. It was not organized. Loose pages. Mixed dates. Numbers without context. I glanced at it once and then looked at him. This is how you have been managing it? I asked. He hesitated. I kept track of most of it, in my head. I nodded slowly. That explains more than you think. I pulled the folder closer and began sorting without rushing. Papers aligned. Categories forming. Dates stacking into timelines. My father watched closely, his eyes following each movement like he was trying to understand a process he had underestimated. My mother remained still, her hands folded, but her attention never left the table. My brother leaned forward, elbows on his knees, like he was waiting for a verdict that had not yet been spoken. I flipped through the first set of documents. Credit lines. Personal guarantees. Short-term notes with high interest rates. I paused at one page, tapping it lightly. This one, I said. When did you sign it? My brother leaned in, scanning quickly. About 8 months ago. I nodded. And did you read the full terms? He did not answer immediately. That was answer enough. I set the page aside. 32% interest, I said calmly. Compounding monthly. My father's expression tightened. That is not sustainable, he said. No, I agreed. It was never designed to be. I continued sorting, building the structure piece by piece. You were not building a business, I added gently. You were building a delay. My brother let out a slow breath, his shoulders dropping slightly. I thought I could outpace it, he said. Growth would catch up. I gave a small, understanding nod. Hope is not a strategy, I said, my tone still soft. It is a placeholder. The room absorbed that without resistance. I reached the bottom of the stack and aligned everything into 3 clean piles. Clear. Contained. Understandable. Here is where we are, I said, resting my hands lightly on the table. You have layered obligations with conflicting timelines. Short-term pressure against long-term assumptions. That is why it feels overwhelming. Not because it is impossible. Because it was never meant to be managed this way. My brother looked up at me, something in his expression shifting from panic to focus. So what do I do? He asked. I met his gaze directly. You stop pretending it is one problem, I said. It is 3. I pointed to the first pile. Immediate liabilities. These need to be stabilized within 30 days. Then the second. Midterm restructuring. Negotiations, extensions, possible consolidation. Then the third. Long-term viability. Whether the business itself deserves to survive. My father leaned forward again, his attention sharper now. And your recommendation? He asked. I allowed a small pause. Not for effect. For clarity. We protect the structure first, I said. Then we decide what is worth saving inside it. My mother spoke quietly. And if something is not worth saving? I looked at her, my expression calm, steady. Then we let it go, I said. Before it takes everything else with it. The words settled into the room with a different kind of weight. Not fear. Not pressure. Just truth. My brother nodded slowly, as if something inside him had finally aligned with reality. I understand, he said. I watched him for a moment, then allowed the slightest hint of warmth into my voice. Good, I said. Understanding is where responsibility begins. I leaned back slightly, the structure now visible, the chaos reduced to something manageable. Now we can actually begin. I did not move the papers right away. I let them sit there, arranged, visible, undeniable. Structure has a way of making truth harder to ignore. My brother leaned back slightly, his hands resting on his knees now instead of gripping each other. That was the first shift. Small. But real. My father remained forward, his attention fixed on the 3 piles like he was studying a blueprint he had not designed. My mother looked between all of us, quieter than before, but no longer distant. So what happens first? My father asked. His voice was different now. Not leading. Not directing. Asking. I folded my hands lightly on the table. First, I said, we stop the bleeding. I pointed to the first stack. These obligations are time-sensitive. If they are ignored, everything else collapses behind them. My brother nodded quickly. I can call them, he said. Explain the situation. I shook my head gently. You can call them, I agreed. But you will not explain. You will listen. He paused. Listen? I nodded. People reveal more when they think you are still trying to understand, I said. Not when you are trying to convince them. He absorbed that, slower this time. More carefully. Okay, he said. I can do that. I slid a notepad toward him. You will write everything down, I added. Names. Dates. Terms. No memory. Only records. He picked up the pen without hesitation. Another shift. My father exhaled slowly, sitting back for the first time since we began. And the house? He asked. If the situation is as serious as you say, I met his eyes. It is, I said calmly. He gave a small nod. Accepting. Not arguing. That, too, was new. The house stays for now, I continued. But it is no longer an asset. It is a responsibility. That means no additional risk attached to it. No refinancing. No leverage. It becomes stable. My mother spoke softly. We can manage that. I glanced at her briefly. You will need to, I said. Consistency matters more than intention at this stage. She nodded, her hands loosening slightly in her lap. I turned back to my brother. Second, I said, gesturing to the middle. Stack, we restructure. He leaned forward again, but this time there was focus instead of urgency. What does that look like? He asked. I allowed a faint smile. Not amused. Just acknowledging the question. It looks like discipline, I said. We contact each creditor with a clear position. Not desperation. Not excuses. Terms. Adjustments. Extensions. I paused briefly. And we do it one at a time. He nodded again. Slower. More deliberate. I understand. I watched him for a moment, then added quietly, you will not promise anything you cannot deliver. He met my gaze. I will not. The room held that commitment without needing to repeat it. My father cleared his throat slightly. And the business? He asked. I shifted my attention to the final stack. That is the last conversation, I said. Because it is the only one that requires honesty without protection. My brother's expression tightened just slightly. Not fear. Just awareness. Meaning? He asked. I leaned back, my tone still even, still composed. Meaning we decide whether it survives based on reality, I said. Not effort. Not time invested. Not pride. I let that settle. Then I added, softer, but clear, some things deserve to continue. Some things only continue because no one is willing to end them. Silence followed. Not heavy. Just necessary. My mother looked at my brother, her expression gentler than I had ever seen it. My father remained still, but his posture had changed. Less rigid. More present. I glanced at all three of them, then rested my hands lightly on the table again. We move step by step, I said. No rushing. No skipping. I paused, just long enough to make sure they were listening in a different way now. And we do it together, I added quietly. That was the part that changed everything. Not the plan. Not the numbers. The word. Together. This time, it was not assumed. It was chosen. I did not rush the next step. Plans feel clean on paper. Reality rarely does. My brother made his first call that afternoon, sitting at the same table, the notepad in front of him, pen ready. I did not speak while he dialed. I just watched. Not the phone. Him. Hello, this is Daniel Monroe, he said. His voice controlled but not rehearsed. I am calling regarding account ending in 4821. He paused, listening. Really listening. That part mattered more than anything he would say. His eyes shifted slightly as he wrote something down. Terms. Names. Numbers. Not guesses this time. Facts. He nodded once, even though they could not see him. I understand, he said. What options are available if I restructure within 30 days? Better. Not defensive. Not pleading. Just, clear. When the call ended, he placed the pen down carefully, like it had weight now. They are willing to extend, he said, looking at me. But only if I commit to a revised schedule. I nodded once. That is how leverage works, I replied. They want to see movement before they offer relief. He let out a breath that sounded steadier than before. Not relieved. Just, grounded. My father watched the exchange without interrupting. That was new too. He had always preferred to step in early, to control the direction before it unfolded. Now he waited. Observed. Adjusted. My mother stood up quietly and walked to the kitchen, returning a moment later with a small tray. Fresh coffee. Cups placed gently in front of each of us. No words. Just presence. I noticed that. Small things tend to reveal bigger shifts. We moved through the next few calls the same way. One at a time. No rushing. No skipping. Some conversations were cooperative. Others were not. One creditor refused to adjust anything, their terms rigid, their tone colder. My brother's grip tightened slightly on the pen, but he did not argue. He wrote everything down. Every word. Every condition. When he hung up, he looked at me. That one is not flexible, he said. I nodded. Then we treat it differently, I replied. Not every door opens the same way. I reached for the notepad and drew a small line next to that account. This becomes priority, I added. Because resistance usually signals risk. My father leaned forward slightly. And if they do not move at all? He asked. I met his gaze. Then we adjust around them, I said. Structure is not about control. It is about adaptation. He nodded slowly. That answer stayed with him longer than the others. As the afternoon shifted into evening, the table no longer looked chaotic. Notes were organized. Calls were logged. Numbers had context. The unknown had edges now. My brother sat back, running a hand through his hair, not out of stress this time, but out of thought. This feels different, he said quietly. I glanced at him. Because it is, I replied. You are not reacting anymore. You are responding. He gave a small nod, almost to himself. My mother sat beside him, closer than before, her presence steady, not intrusive. My father remained across from me, but his posture had softened, the distance between us no longer defined by silence. He looked at me for a moment, then said, You built this without us. It was not a question. I held his gaze. Yes, I said simply. He exhaled, not heavily, just, honestly. And now you are choosing to include us. I tilted my head slightly, a faint trace of warmth in my expression. That is correct, I said. He nodded once, slower than usual. Accepting something he had not anticipated. I gathered the papers into a single stack, aligning them carefully. We continue tomorrow, I said. Same process. Same pace. My brother looked at the stack, then back at me. And after that? He asked. I allowed a small pause. Not for effect. For clarity. After that, I said, we decide what deserves to move forward. I stood up, signaling the end of the day without saying it directly. The room followed that cue naturally. No confusion. No tension. Just understanding. And as they prepared to leave, my mother paused near the door, her hand resting lightly against the frame. She looked back at me, her voice quiet but steady. You are not who we thought you were, she said. I met her eyes, calm as always. No, I replied gently. I never was. The next morning started earlier than the one before. Not because there was urgency. Because there was clarity. I was already at the table when they arrived, the papers laid out in the same order, the structure unchanged. Consistency matters more than momentum. My brother sat down without hesitation this time, opening his notebook before I said a word. That was the first sign. Not confidence. Discipline. My father followed, quieter, observing but no longer trying to anticipate. My mother placed the coffee down again, the same careful motion, the same quiet presence. Some patterns are worth keeping. We moved through the final set of decisions with less resistance than I expected. The most difficult one came last. The business itself. I turned the final stack toward my brother. This is the part that requires the most honesty, I said. He nodded slowly, his eyes on the numbers, not avoiding them anymore. It is not working, he said. The words came out steady. No hesitation. No defense. Just truth. I watched him for a moment, then gave a small nod. No, I agreed. It is not. My father shifted slightly, his expression tightening just enough to show what it cost him to hear that. Years of belief. Investment. Identity. All condensed into one sentence. My mother reached over and placed her hand lightly on my brother's arm. Not to stop him. Just to be there. Then we close it, my brother said. The room held that decision without breaking. No argument. No panic. Just acceptance. I leaned back slightly, letting the weight of it settle into something stable. Then we close it, I repeated. Not as approval. As confirmation. We spent the next hour mapping the exit. Clean. Controlled. No unnecessary loss. No emotional attachment disguised as strategy. Just a clear end to something that had already ended in every way except on paper. When we finished, the table looked different. Not empty. Complete. My brother closed his notebook and rested his hands on it, his posture steady, his breathing even. I should have done this sooner, he said quietly. I met his gaze. You did it now, I replied. That is what matters. My father stood up slowly, walking a few steps before stopping near the window. He looked out, hands behind his back, the way he used to when he was thinking through something he could not control. I spent years measuring value the wrong way, he said, not turning around. The sentence stayed in the air longer than anything else he had said since he arrived. I did not interrupt. Some realizations need space more than response. He turned back toward me. After a moment, his expression composed, but different. Less rigid. More aware. I was wrong about you, he said. Direct. No qualification. I inclined my head slightly. Yes, I said gently. My mother stood next, stepping closer but not too close, her voice softer than it had ever been when I lived under the same roof. We did not see you, she said. I held her gaze, calm, steady. No, I agreed. You did not. There was no bitterness in it. Just truth. And for the first time, that truth did not divide the room. It clarified it. My brother stood last, looking at me with something that had not been there before. Respect. Not assumed. Earned. Thank you, he said. I gave a small, almost amused smile. Do not thank me yet, I replied lightly. We still have to follow through. A faint laugh escaped him, quiet but real. We walked toward the door together this time. Not as strangers navigating unfamiliar space. Not as a family pretending nothing had happened. Something in between. Something more honest. At the threshold, my father paused, his hand resting briefly against the frame. He looked at me one last time, not measuring, not evaluating. Just seeing. You built something strong, he said. I met his eyes, the same calm tone I had carried from the beginning. I built something stable, I corrected gently. Strength came later. He nodded once, understanding more than he said. They stepped outside, the morning light settling around them, different from the way it had when they first arrived. The gate closed behind them with the same quiet sound. But this time it did not feel like an ending. I stood there for a moment, my hand resting lightly against the door, the house quiet again, the table still set, the structure still in place. 7 years ago, I had walked out with a suitcase and a sentence that followed me longer than it should have. Today, the same people who said it stood inside a life that proved it wrong without me ever needing to argue. I picked up my cup, now warm again, and took a slow sip, the taste steady, familiar. Some things do not need to be said twice to be understood. And some doors, when they open again, they do not return you to who you were. They show you who you chose to become.